Hi, everyone. Thank you for listening to a new episode of Grace of a Military Child in Life. Today, I'm with Alyssa, who is also a fellow podcast host and Army veteran and Air Force spouse. So, Alyssa, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Thanks. I'm doing good. Just got the kids dropped off and now I've got 3 hours to myself.
Yes, cannot pass that up.
Yeah.
So first off, thank you for your service at in the
Thank
Army.
you.
But tell me what it's like being a military spouse and, the transition from, being a service member yourself as well.
Well, I think being a veteran and then transitioning into the role of a military spouse, I feel like that kind of helped me to understand it a little bit more because my husband and I were both military together for a little while. And so I kind of understood what a TDY is. What
Right.
is he going to experience when he's TDY? What is he going to experience when he's deployed? And kind of, I guess, the lingo and just understanding the process. So I feel like it was actually kind of nice that I was military before. I felt like I could understand it a little bit more once I became a military spouse. It definitely got harder as we added in children because I had never, we were both military and didn't have kids yet. And so being a military spouse and then navigating the deployments with kids makes it definitely a little bit more difficult than our first two deployments when it was just us.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Once you start, even though you understand the lifestyle, once you
Hmm.
start adding kids onto it, it becomes a whole different aspect that you're still trying to figure out.
Yeah, it's definitely different and adds different dynamics to it as well. And then moving, I had moved as a military veteran. I went to Germany by myself when I was single. I deployed to Afghanistan. And then when I came back stateside, him and I were married. And then I got out of the military. And then we were there for a long time. He was at his first duty station for 14 years.
Oh, wow.
And so then by the time we did his first PCS, it was like, okay, now we have two kids. I'm a military spouse and we're moving to Hawaii. And it was like,
Oh
okay,
my
this is so
goodness.
different than moving
Yeah.
to Germany by myself. I could just bring my one suitcase and go. And now I have to figure out, okay, how do I get their school stuff going, change all the doctors, pack our stuff and move. It's different when you're moving as a whole family.
Yeah, especially because you were there for so long. When you're
Yes.
moving
Yeah.
every 2 years, every 3 years, you kind of
Right.
the first couple are tricky, and then,
Hmm.
as you add more kids on, between moves, it
Right.
gets more tricky as well.
Yeah.
But being in one spot for so long and, I'm sure
Yes.
Hawaii is gorgeous and fun
It
and
is.
tons
It
of
is.
memories, but it's hard to move literally across an ocean. Um,
Yes.
into an Okonos location because
Right,
that's
for
what
your
it's
first.
considered.
Right. Yeah. It's
Yeah,
considered overseas. When I would explain that to non-military people, I'm like, we're moving overseas. I'm like, I know it's not really
but
like
it
what you would
is.
consider overseas, but I was like, we have to ship a car. We have to
Yeah,
ship all of our household goods. It's not like we can load up in a U-Haul and do a Diddy move
right.
and move ourselves. And like I said, when I went to Germany, it was so different. I mean, I feel like it was not stressful at all. I was like, oh, here's my suitcase, and somebody will hand me a barracks room when I arrive. And it's just easy versus with kids, you're like, okay, everybody's got to get enrolled in school. We
Yeah.
need to switch everybody's pediatricians, their dentists, any specialist doctors. And so it was a big move. It was a lot. It was very eye-opening because that, like I said, we've been fortunate. We didn't have to move every 2 to 3 years. Like when I was Army. And
Mhm.
so we would move every 2 to 3 years versus the Air Force, which is what my spouse is in. His job and where he was, they don't move as often. And
Right.
so it's like you don't experience that. And so we've kind of been fortunate. We were able to get settled in to Oklahoma and had our whole network. And now we have to start all over. It's
Right.
very eye-opening.
Yeah, and not only do you have the kids' stuff to worry about, you have your stuff to worry about, and
Right.
then your husband's stuff to worry about, and getting
Yeah.
everything figured out and
Hmm.
moving and military makes it a little easier on, the service member aspect of,
I think so.
you don't have much to do.
Right.
But then, as a mom, you're then left with the rest of the to-do list of, okay,
Hmm.
all the kids stuff, which I'm
Right.
sure comes first, and then,
Absolutely.
everything else, and, getting a house and,
Yes.
while, like I said earlier, Hawaii must be fun and, a great duty station to be at, it's
Mhm.
it's still hard,
It's
uh,
still hard.
like
Yeah.
any other move.
Right. Well, and it's so different versus, if I was moving from Oklahoma to Kansas or South
Mhm.
Carolina, we could be shopping online for houses, or
Sure.
some of them would allow you to apply to the housing list versus Hawaii. Depending on which housing communities we applied to, you couldn't get on the wait list until you arrive.
Oh, wow.
And so that changes everything. It's like, okay, we're going to get there and stay in a hotel. And many people told us, you're going to be in a hotel for months.
Mm.
And so then there's that whole other anxious moment of, okay, so now I'm going to be living in a hotel room with 2 kids and all of our stuff for months. Did you say
Yeah.
months? And so then I was diving into all of the spouse pages and looking for tips and tricks and how do I travel with children and live in a hotel room with kids. And so
Mhm.
we ended up traveling with totes. I don't know if you've ever seen anybody move overseas with the totes,
Yes.
but we had, I think it was 6 black totes, like 40-gallon totes, 3 suitcases, a pack and play, and then their car seats,
Oh my goodness.
and then loaded up and went. And so in each tote, I like made a checklist of what was going to be in each one, like a kitchen tote, and toy tote, beach tote, because of course Hawaii, we have to be ready
Yes.
to hit the beach and hit the pool immediately. That way we could get out of that hotel room. So
Right.
I had like a small pop-up tent and floaties, and I was trying to be as prepared as possible because I knew it was going to be a big transition for my kiddos too. And I wanted them to feel calm and be able to settle in once we arrived, for sure.
Right. And I'm sure, as soon as their eyes get locked in on the beach,
Yeah.
that
Oh, yeah.
is the first thing that they wanna do.
Yes.
Nothing else needs to come first.
Yes. My daughter was loving it. And the pool, it's like
Yeah.
we had been so close to a pool, and now we can be in the pool every day. I mean, even now it's just, about to be December, and we can go to the beach. The pool
Yeah.
says like, okay, we got to have everything ready because that's where we're going to be, the pool and the beach.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that's one thing that a lot of, uh, civilian families don't recognize about
Hmm.
how powerful these moves can be of literally
Yeah.
having to fly with totes
Yes.
and,
It
checking
seems
that
ridiculous.
luggage. It
Yeah,
does, and
it's big.
it's something that nobody would think of, and then you see these
Mhm.
pictures of military families moving with totes and, have the big carts pushing literally their
Right.
entire house,
Yeah,
through the airport, and it's like, you almost look at those like a horror story, thinking, "Oh,
yeah.
that's never gonna happen to me. That's never gonna happen. Like, I've never seen it before, so it rarely happens." And then you talk to military families, and it's like,
Mhm.
no, especially when overseas moves come with a big
Oh,
family,
yeah.
you're like, "This is the regular. This is how we have to move because we don't have another option, really. And what are we gonna
Right,
do? Throw it all in a crate on a boat and hope it
right,
gets
and
there
it's gonna
in
take
2 months?"
months to get to you and your
Yeah.
car.
Yeah.
It's like those little things that you don't really think about until you're actually navigating it. My church community was like, you're one of my friends there was like, "You're one of the first military people I've ever known." And she's like, I had no idea what went into, because we had just finished a deployment. My husband was
Mhm.
gone for 6 months, and it was my children's first deployment, and it was a long 6 months. And then he was about to come home, and he's like, "Oh, and by the way, I just found out we're moving to Hawaii." And so it's like,
Yeah.
"Oh my goodness, okay, so we just survived 6 months. Now we have, I think it was like 4 to 6 months to prepare, and now we're moving to Hawaii." So it's like a lot of change can happen in a year as a military family, not only enduring your spouse being away from you and navigating that with your kids, and then also the moves, because usually people are moving, summer, winter, and then trying to navigate that. It's like a constant
Yeah.
changes and changes, and you just kind of have to move with it because you never know when it's going to happen. We went 14 years without moving, and then all of a sudden we had a deployment and a move all in one year, and it was just a lot.
Right. And it sounds bad, but the military doesn't necessarily think about the family.
No. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
there's one mission that needs to be accomplished,
Right.
and, the rest of the family is just along for the ride. And,
Right.
being a veteran yourself, I'm sure you kinda understood that point coming into it, but,
Right.
that's the one thing is, like, the military just has that goal in mind, and then the family, we just kinda ride along with it,
You're just
and
along for the ride.
there's no other choice,
Yeah.
so
Yeah. Well, because I mean, unfortunately, if you think about it, there's so many military members and then the members and all of their children, it would be difficult
Right.
for the military to drop everything for each individual that
Yeah.
comes along with the member. And so it's so hard to navigate that. And, I mean, we tried to move our moving date based on our child's school
Mhm.
because we ended up moving in April. And I was like, well, I don't want her to like have to move to Hawaii, live in a hotel, and start a new school all at once. I felt like
Right.
that would be very stressful for her. And fortunately, we had a wonderful school in Oklahoma and they let us do distance learning. That's a pro to COVID is that they have that capability now.
Right.
And so they let us do distance learning so she could do packets and stuff with me in the hotel and still get credit for finishing kindergarten in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And so I was really thankful for that. So that was one less thing we personally didn't have to deal with, thank goodness, was arriving. And I saw people taking their kids to school. Some people didn't have that option to do the distance learning from the hotel. So they
Mhm.
would arrive to Hawaii. Their kids are at the end of the school year, and now you're having to start a new school. You're living in a hotel. You're trying to find a house. And it's just a lot of change and trying to get comfortable. I mean, trying to be in your own routine while living in a hotel room is hard enough,
Right.
you
Yeah, I
know?
remember, our last move was when my dad retired, and
Okay.
so we took, of course, the remainder of the leave at the end of his
Yes.
right
Yeah.
before he retired,
Uh-huh.
and we made sure that we moved, um, right after I was in 6th grade and my sister was in 5th
Okay.
grade, so we moved right
So
after
tough
that
years.
cutoff
Yeah.
day. Right,
Yeah.
tough years to begin with,
Yeah.
and
Junior
then,
high. Yeah.
um our cutoff was May 23rd, and then we
Right at
still
the
there
end.
were, like, 2 or 3 weeks left of school at that point, and
Hmm.
so that was me and one of my other friends moved, literally at the same day because that was the day where the school would say, "Okay, y'all have learned enough, y'all have been here
Oh,
enough days,
good.
you can
Thank
miss the
goodness.
rest of this, and
Yes.
you'll still get credit for
That's
that
awesome.
year." And
Yeah.
so I think we were very fortunate that we were able to do that, um,
Absolutely. That's awesome.
rather than, having to move,
Right.
in the
And
middle of the school year.
start a
Yeah.
new school for 1 month. It's like, oh my gosh, everybody already has their friend groups,
Yes.
schedules, and now we're gonna launch you in there.
Exactly,
That's
and,
a lot.
every state is so different with how they run school, and
Yes.
so, in Texas, we would be going until, like, the 1st week of June, and
Right.
then in
Yeah.
Florida, where we are now and, where we finished our education, it was, like, the last week of May, so we would have literally
Mm.
moved here, had a week, and
They're
then
like, we're
moved.
done.
Yeah, exactly. So it would have been chaos to be able to have to
Yeah.
do that. And, that's no matter what grade it is, even
Right.
kindergarten, like, that is really hard to do.
Yeah. I just feel like, for her, I know kindergarten sounds like, oh, but
Yeah.
they're just so young at that point, and it already feels like a big pressure to be in these new schools and
Mhm.
moving around. I was like, oh my goodness, I just don't want to launch you into a new thing after
Right.
I've already ripped you out of everything else that you've been in. And like I said, just eye-opening because we were so fortunate we haven't moved a whole lot. And when we got
Mhm.
here, we met a lot of families that have been moving every 2 to 3 years and seeing how they navigate it and how organized they are. I'm like, y'all are rock stars. And I had never really met anybody in the Navy because I only knew really Army and Air Force.
Mhm.
And it blew my mind that some of the Navy spouses were arriving here without their spouse because their spouse would almost go on like a trip, I guess like underway is what they call theirs. They would already be underway while the spouse and the children and the pets and everything were moving here, or they left immediately once arriving to Hawaii. I guess because, of course, we're near water, so they probably go out more.
Right.
And I was like, oh my gosh, so you're in this hotel with your kids and you're trying to find new housing, pick up your car, get your kids settled, and check in for all the military stuff, and your spouse is already gone. I'm like, I don't know how y'all do it. You're rock stars. You're
Right.
amazing.
Yeah. And, every branch is so different. Like
Yeah.
you mentioned the differences between Army and Air Force, with
Right.
moving.
Mhm.
And with every single branch, a lot of people, I think there's a big misconception that it's like, okay, you have the military and then you have the branches of it. And,
Right.
Marines are pretty much the front lines and then Air Force is in the
Mhm.
sky, Navy is in, you
In the
have all of,
water.
yeah, you have each one that does their specific job, in a
Mhm.
sense. And you would think it's all the same, but
Yeah, you would.
no,
It's
it's so
not.
different.
Yeah,
There,
they're all very different.
yeah, there are so many differences just between, even Air Force and Space Force. Like Space Force was a branch of the Air
Right.
Force, to begin with. And
Right.
then it got broken off and it's still so different now,
Mhm.
between the two of what goes on, obviously what the mission is, but then,
Right.
moves and PCSs and
Yeah, how often you're gonna
deployments.
go. Yeah, how
Right.
long your deployments are. I know, like, for Army, ours are a year,
Mhm.
and, I did one of those, and when we were trying to decide, which one of us should stay in the military, it was like, "Okay, well, let's look at pros and cons of the 2 branches."
Mhm.
And I felt like Army, I was like, "Well, I'll be deployed for a year. We're gonna move every 2 to 3 years." And so before we had kids, we're like, okay, we need to figure this out because dual military is not working. It was hard to get stationed together for us. It works
Mhm.
for some people, but for us, it was definitely hard. And so it's like, let's go with Air Force. The bases tend to be a little bit nicer, is what I've heard. I mean, we've only been to
Yeah.
2 of them, so I'm not
The ones
not
I have
sure.
been to, they have been significantly
Yeah, I've
nicer.
heard they're usually a little bit nicer. It's like the deployments tend to be a little shorter, and so we ended up just going that route. But I definitely sometimes miss being in the Army because I definitely enjoyed it. I had a cool job. It was fun. But
Yeah.
I'm glad that we have the Air Force side of it too, where we're shorter trips when he's gone, which is nice.
Yeah, it's definitely, like you said, there are people who do make dual military work and are very successful
Yeah.
with it. And tons of admiration to those
Yeah.
families that do that because especially when you bring kids into it is hard
Hmm.
and it's hard to make work, especially typically they tend to be the same MOS or something very similar. So then
Hmm.
you it is a much easier to get stations together.
Right.
Um, but, when you bring in different branches and stuff like
Yeah.
that, you don't have
It's
that, and
harder.
deployments can happen at the same time, and,
Right.
so many things stack up on each other, and I've had friends who have gone and stayed with grandparents because, both of their parents were deployed at the same time, and it just
Wow. See,
doesn't happen.
that would be hard.
Yeah,
I was definitely worried that we would accidentally get orders to different places.
yeah.
I was like, I don't know if anybody would fight for us or not,
Mhm,
because when we didn't have kids and we were married, it was already quite a fight between the 2 branches to get somebody to talk to somebody else. I was supposed to go, I was leaving Germany and I had a ticket to go to the East Coast, and he was still in Oklahoma and there was no sight of him ever moving. I
mhm.
was like, okay, so now we're going to be apart again. We had already been apart for 2 years.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, now we're going to be, states apart. And then what happens when we have kids? Could that ever happen? Would we potentially be stationed in different states or, oh my goodness, Oconus and Conus? That would be insane. So we were just too nervous to roll the dice. I was like, we're just going to play it safe. One of us gets out and one of us stays in. And that, I feel like that's our safest bet.
Yeah, for sure, because like you said,
Yeah.
you never know. You truly never know until those orders are cut
Right.
and finalized and you're
Mhm.
there because orders can change at the drop of a dime.
They
And
change
so
quickly.
you never know. You could have orders to go overseas and then,
Right.
you get there even and they say, "Oh, nope, sorry, you're going back."
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, oh, okay, let me just flip my whole life upside down. You
Yeah.
just got to be able to roll with it. And so it's a big thing.
Yeah, exactly. And Like I said, admiration to those families who do make it work, but
Yeah.
it's such a challenge because you never know.
Hmm.
And, it's like you said with school, it makes it hard with that. And then so many other things that, it's already a challenge with you know,
Right.
one family and then one family member in the military.
Hmm.
And then you start bringing more into that. It's just chaos from there.
Right. And then you
Yeah.
try and add in your pets too. Like I've seen people moving that have their pets, and I'm like, more props to you guys because that's a lot of work. Like coming to Hawaii, they're really strict with your pets for their
Right.
vaccinations. And so I've seen people and they're talking about, oh, we couldn't fly because of the temperature, so their dog couldn't fly. And
Oh,
now they have to
wow.
wait for somebody else to ship their pet to them. And I'm like, oh my goodness, the whole overseas part too is just depending on where you're going can be so different. And there's just a lot of ins and outs. And so definitely joining like all the spouse groups, I feel like is really important. I feel like that helped me the most when I was moving. And so I'm
Mhm.
glad that I kind of knew to connect with any spouse group I could find on Facebook for asking all the questions, which housing communities to live in, which hotels to live in, all of that kind of stuff, I feel like is so helpful. So it's also nice that there's like this network
Yeah.
of all the military spouses work together, share information, and help each other too. So it's a nice.
Yeah. I think a lot of people think about those like spouse groups on Facebook and stuff and automatically just link it to, base drama or what's going on
Yeah,
or
I mean, that's
the
there too, for
chaos.
sure.
And it's there. But
It's
if you
there that people
filter
can get
through,
catty.
yes, anywhere.
Yeah.
But filtering through that, there's so
Yeah.
many good resources and valuable information, especially when you're moving to a specific location that you've never been to before.
Right.
Because I think Hawaii is on, like, everyone's bucket list of,
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
to go and visit, but, if you haven't gone and visited, you don't know what you're getting into when you're moving there, and the only way to know is connecting with people that do live there or have lived there and know what's going on and know, what you can expect and how to navigate everything going into it, and that applies to any duty station, even,
Yeah.
moving within the states of, one base in, I don't know, like, Oklahoma to Florida or something, where it's
Right.
still a substantial move, but it's a little easier.
Right. Well, because you still don't know, okay, if I'm looking at a house online that I
Mhm.
might want to rent or buy when I get to Florida, is that in a nice neighborhood? How would
Yeah.
I, it's like, how do you know from so far away? So I feel like that was like some of the top questions I would see for people moving into Oklahoma. It's like, okay, if I lived in, Edmond, how long would it take me to get to the base? And so even
Right.
like simple questions like that, is the commute doable if I live in this city or this city? Do these ones have good schools? Or is this a safe area to live? So even those like simple questions are nice to be able to ask on those pages. And that way, when you're moving, you kind of have like an idea because it's hard to just move to a new city and buy a home and you're just kind of guessing because you've never lived there before. And so then Hawaii or any other overseas locations, like a whole nother step up because you're like, okay, now I have to look at all the different housing communities. Same thing with like the commute, like how far is it? All that kind of stuff that just lots of questions. And so it's a nice place to kind of filter through and see what people have asked in the past and then updated information too, and just re-asking the questions because things change.
Right. Exactly, and you never know. One of the biggest things with, like, commuting is you never know the traffic that's gonna
Yes, and
come
it
up.
is big here.
Oh, I'm sure. It's such a
Yeah.
small,
Yeah.
little place that,
Hmm.
it's everyone's trying to get somewhere, and
Hmm.
so pretty much at the same time.
At the
So
same time. That's why I was
you
like, we're going to live right near our base. We're not going to
yeah.
live. We slightly thought about living in a different one because people are like, oh, this is the beautiful side. And we're
Mhm.
like, oh, okay. We went out there and I'm like, no, we don't need to commute. And it blew my mind. Some people are like, oh, they canoe to work. I'm like, they canoe to
Oh,
work. So I
I've
guess some of
never
the
heard of
areas have
that.
like, right? Some of them have like a water area where you can go and get to the base. I'm like, well, that's interesting. But I
It's
think
very
we're going to live as
interesting.
close as we can get, and not have to battle traffic because I don't want to sit in that every single day.
Yeah, and then I'm sure if canoeing is a big thing to get to work,
Right. I feel like
there'd
that's a lot
be
of work.
some traffic there, some sort of backup
Right.
in a canal or something
Right.
along
I'm
the
like,
way.
that's not my cup of tea. You know,
Yeah.
if you want to ride your bike to work, okay, if we live close enough, but I don't know about canoeing.
Yeah. That's a little interesting. I'm sure
Yeah.
there's gotta be, like, some sort of gate or something they've
Right. I'm
gotta
like,
go
I don't
through.
know.
No,
When in
that's so
Hawaii,
interesting.
right?
Yeah, and it's so crazy because you don't hear about those things, you know? Again,
No.
I'm sure somebody mentioned it on the spouse pages, but you
Mhm.
don't hear or think about those things until
Right.
somebody says it to you, and it's like, "Okay, are you
Like,
being
that's a
for
thing,
real?" Yeah.
right? Are you being serious or are you trolling me right now?
No, and it's the things that are unique to each location
Right.
are
Yeah.
so incredible and, you know, just the different cultures within the United
Mhm.
States and even though Hawaii is considered a,
United States, yeah.
Okonos location, but it's the United States. And
Mhm.
so it's just so different. And, Alaska is the same way, it's still so different.
Right,
But
yeah.
then the continental United States, like you never know what you're getting into when you go to a different place.
Right. But it's such a cool opportunity. Like, that's something that I love about being in the military, and now that I'm not, active duty, but being a spouse, like, I still get to experience it,
Yeah.
which is so cool. I always tell people I've seen ones that are like, "Should I take this Oconus trip or should I just stay stateside? I'm nervous to do the Oconus thing with kids."
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, "It's difficult, but they're never gonna get these experiences again." I mean, how
Right.
cool is it for your kid to get to grow up in Spain
Mm-hmm.
or Germany, Hawaii? I was like, it's difficult being far away from your family. That's a struggle for me. When we found out we were coming here, I was pretty devastated. I was
Right.
excited to see Hawaii, but I was not excited to go on another trip where I was so far from my family. My kids aren't going to get to see my parents as often. But I was also telling myself, this is such an opportunity for our kids to experience hikes and the beach, and they can do Hawaii over several years versus having to pay all this money to go on one big vacation, and you're trying to get each thing in. You can only see so much on that 1 week vacation.
Yeah.
And so, like, this is our chance to get to show them Hawaii and a different lifestyle than what we were living in Oklahoma. We're able to get outside so much more here and get more active and moving, and, just make the best of it, really, and go out and experience it while the military is the one sending you. Like, this is your chance. Go out
Right.
and explore.
And it's fun because you can, especially going to places like that, and I think people do it for any, duty station,
Mhm.
but you see it a lot more for those fun and adventurous ones like
Right.
Hawaii
Cool
or Germany,
places.
and
Mhm.
they just build a bucket list of so many things that they
Absolutely.
wanna do when they get there, and I think
Yes.
that is so important because it helps, if you're scared of going or if you're
Right, yeah.
nervous, and
The
especially
unknown.
kids who are in school and have friends and don't
Mhm.
wanna
That part's
move.
hard.
Yeah, so it's like an encouragement of, "Okay, no, this sucks, like, we are
Mhm.
going to go through such a big change in our lives, but we're gonna make it fun, and we're gonna go and do all of these things and, go to the beaches, travel and explore the
Mhm.
different islands, go hiking, and so many incredible things within just one state."
Right. Yep, that's definitely what I told my oldest, because she had mixed emotions. She would be super excited about the move, and then she would go towards but I'm gonna miss everybody. And I
Yeah.
kept reminding her, that's okay. I'm gonna miss everybody too. I'm gonna miss
Yeah.
our church and our community and the home that we've built here. But I am also very excited about our next opportunity. I'm excited to meet new people, and I'm excited about this, or this in Hawaii. And I would show her pictures and videos and try and show her the positives, but also remind her that it's also okay to miss what we're about to leave. It's okay to be sad about leaving where we currently are, because that's totally normal. I mean, I'm going to
Mhm.
miss all my friends as well. And it's like, we got to take that piece in and not try and shove it down.
Yeah.
Accept that, but also look forward to what are we going to get to experience now, and look at those positives as well and take them all together. And I feel like that helped her, because I would show her pictures of the hotel what it was going to look like. We're going to have a pool, and then I let her help pack our boxes, like our totes.
Mhm.
Pick your favorite toys that you want to put into this tote. This is the toy tote for you and your sister. And I want y'all to pick what you really want to be able to see, because some other things we might not see for a while.
Yeah.
And so I feel like that also helped her to prepare the baby. She was only a little over a year old when we moved. So for her, she was just along for the ride.
Yeah.
She didn't care either way. But for my oldest, it helped to let her pack the boxes and look at the pictures and take it all in to help her prepare mentally for such a big change.
Yeah, and I think that's one fun thing that when kids do get to that age where they begin to understand what's going on is
What's
they can
happening.
help
Yeah.
and they can,
Yeah.
start to make those memories for themselves of, okay, yeah, I'm going to be sad and it's going to be hard for,
Yeah.
a period of time. And then, we're going to do fun things, these are the toys I'm going to
Mhm.
get to see again for
Yes.
sure, like
Right.
relatively soon. But these ones, it might be a while. And,
Hmm.
you know, I'm gonna miss my friends, but I can make new friends and, we can go to the
Hmm.
beach together, or we can do so many different things that, just starting to look forward to what you have coming and,
Right.
still remembering what you have back in Oklahoma or, wherever your
Mhm.
last studio station is.
Yep. And pen pals. We also did
Yes.
the pen pal thing, and her class actually sent us letters that her whole class had written her. It was so sweet. It's
Aw.
like we had the best school. I loved the school that we had in Oklahoma, and they sent letters to her that her little friends had written, and then the teacher had sent like a book for her in a whole little package. They're like, once you get settled and have an address, just send it to us. We want to send these things to her. I was like, you guys are the best.
Yeah, that is so sweet, especially because the
Yeah.
school year was still going.
Yeah. So
And
yeah.
she didn't feel like she was missing out on something because, her classmates still remembered her and,
Yeah.
included her in the class.
Hmm. Yep. It made her feel very special. And then we got postcards as soon as we arrived. And she filled out about how she saw her first mongoose. As we were
Yeah.
walking around the hotel, there was just a mongoose running by. And then tire swings and all the beautiful flowers. And so she wanted to write all the things to her friends to tell them what she had seen so far since arriving to Hawaii, and the rainbows, because the rainbows
Yeah.
in Hawaii are amazing.
Yeah, that's so sweet and such
Yeah.
something that, you think of pen pals, you think of writing letters, and it's like a lost
Hmm.
art form now. And
Absolutely. Yeah.
nobody really does that anymore. But that was
Hmm.
something I found so fun as a kid, being able to, write letters to my dad while he was deployed, or,
Oh, yeah.
we kept journals. And so when he'd go on trainings, we'd have a journal where we'd just write
That's a good
letters to
idea.
him. And at the end of the
Yeah.
year or at the end of the month that he was gone. I
Hmm.
think we even did it when he deployed too, but we would pull them out and we would say, "Hey, this is what we wanted to tell you while you were gone."
Aw,
So,
so sweet. I like that
doing
idea.
things like that, they're still
Yeah.
fun and letters do take much longer to send than a text or an email or a
They do.
FaceTime or something, but it's so fun and so memorable.
I was gonna say, and I was gonna say memorable because you can keep the
Mhm.
letters. Like we have, like even before we had kids, my husband has the postcards that I would send him. Anywhere
Yes.
I would go in Germany or Europe, I would send him a postcard from everywhere I went. And I would write a little bit about what I saw and send it to him. And he kept them all. And so now it's kind of fun. We can show our kids these postcards from when mommy was in Afghanistan, or mommy was seeing different places in the world, and what was I doing and seeing. And so same thing, we send the postcards from here to our family. And it's just, she loves getting to put a little stamp on it even and just go put it in the mailbox. That part's exciting, and
Yeah.
then we can keep some of those ones that we've sent and received, and look back on them someday, because in the moment it seems like we'll never forget these moments. But now I think about it, I'm like, oh my gosh, Germany feels like such an like so long ago.
Mhm.
And so it'll be fun when they're older to get to look back on those little pieces of memories too.
Yeah, I love going through, my mom has a scrapbook of my first trip to my dad was on a stateside deployment to Fort Leonard Wood. And so,
Oh, nice.
she put
Fort
together a
Lost in
little
the Woods.
yes. She put together this little scrapbook and it had I was an infant, so my first plane ticket and,
Oh my
um,
goodness, yeah.
everyone was, pictures of everyone in the barracks that he was staying in his unit, and
Mhm.
everyone was just so excited to meet me, because she
Right,
had gone down there and visited. We were living in Ohio, so she would go down and visit when she was pregnant with me, and then, everyone would be like, "We just wanna meet the child now."
right.
And so, going down there and visiting and, um, just seeing everyone, for that
Mhm.
first time, but it's so fun to look back to that scrapbook,
Yeah.
to those memories of that trip that, my mom, documented, and then
Mhm.
looking back to the journals that I wrote in when my dad was gone or,
Yeah.
um, the letter that he wrote to me while he was deployed. So,
Mhm.
things like that are really fun to look back on, and I'm such a keepsake person, so I
Same,
love to keep all those
same, so much
memories.
same. My husband's like, "You're like a hoarder of these pictures." I'm like, "I know, but I love them so much because, like I said it, I mean, you think you're gonna remember it because 'cause you're in the moment,
Mhm.
but then you look back and you're like, "Wow, look at us here." It's just I do Shutterfly is what I started
I
doing,
love that.
and so I go on there and make their scrapbooks that they have, and so
Yeah.
I've started it when my first daughter was born, and so the start of the scrapbook is always in September and then it ends on her birthday. And so I have
Oh,
one for each year, and I, put a few pictures and then write a little bit in there and then even like quotes from the kids because they say the funniest things. And
yeah.
you're like, I love that you say it that way. And I never want to forget that the way that you talk to your sister about her craziness. I'm going to put that in this scrapbook.
Yeah.
And then we can look back on it, and I always put pictures from, some of the deployment stuff too, like, here was us during our COVID time, here was us during a deployment, and here's pictures of daddy at the Green Bean getting a coffee
Yeah.
for his me day, and now we can look back on those, and I know someday when they're older, we're gonna love getting to see that stuff, and it's hard to keep up with. I feel like it's getting harder now that there's 2 kids, but I'm still trying to occasionally go, pop a few pictures on there, type in some words, and just try and
Yeah,
keep those memories, and then the books are small, so they're easy to keep up with, which is
exactly.
nice. Yeah.
And then, it'll be fun for them to show their kids, like, "Here are the
Yeah.
adventures I went on, literally as an infant that I don't even remember, but,
Right.
this is stuff that I did, and, I can say I've been to Hawaii, I can say I've lived in Hawaii,
Mhm.
I may never do it again, but,
Right.
this is some times that I had there and some things I did
Mhm.
there, and I love those memories.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the last thing I want to ask about is what advice you would give to another military spouse?
Ooh, well, I would say each of the phases will pass. Just remember, even when you're in the deployment and you're in the thick of it, that time will end eventually. It's hard, but just continue to, like, I pray. So I continue to pray through those moments where it gets very difficult and then building a community. It's difficult being a military spouse because you're so far from your family most of the time. So what I've worked hard, and I'm not necessarily an outgoing person all the time, but I've worked really hard to try and meet other military spouses and build my new community so that when my family is far away, I still have people that are there to support me when I'm having a hard day, help watching the kids sometimes so I can, have just a moment to myself if my spouse is gone or deployed. So I would just say each of the phases will end eventually. God never gives you something that you can't handle. And then building a community because those other spouses also know what you're going through. And most of them are more than willing to help support each other through those hard times. Hang in
Yeah,
there.
yeah, absolutely. And it almost slipped my mind, but tell listeners about your podcast as well.
Okay, well, so I recently started a podcast called Homefront Chronicles Podcast. And, I just feel like at this point, I can't return to my regular job. And so I wanted another way to share my experiences in motherhood, my military journey with other moms and try and be supportive and share positive resources. And so decided to start this podcast where I'm going to have on other moms and sharing pieces of our journey and just show that we're all in this together and you're not the only one going through some of the struggles. Sometimes it can feel that way when you watch other people's highlight reels, but hang in there. I hope to be a positive resource if anybody's ever looking for some mom tips or just to see that you're not the only one going through it. Hang in there.
Yes, absolutely. And where
Yeah.
can listeners listen to your podcast at?
So you can find me on Spotify or Apple Podcast, Homefront Chronicles Podcast, and then you can also find me on Instagram at Homefront Chronicles Podcast.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast,
Thank you
Alyssa,
so much
and
for
sharing
inviting me. I really
everything.
enjoyed it.
Yeah, absolutely.